Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into my official college football week number 7 picks and predictions, where I go through and predict the final score of every game involving a ranked opponent. Beginning with a weeknight game, we do have a Friday night game involving Utah, currently the number 16 team in the country. They had that terrible loss 2 weeks ago without Cam Rising. They had a bye week last week, and now they're going on the road to Arizona State. Now, Arizona State is sitting at 5-1 on the year. Utah is only 4-point favorites. The analytics give them basically a coin flip chance to win this game, 51% chance. So the analytics say there's really good value on Arizona State plus the 4. Arizona State with that crowd, they're going to have the energy. They're at home, and they have had a very, very surprisingly good year. I think they win this game in an upset. We know college football, those weeknight games, they can get a little bit more crazy. I just have no confidence in Utah's offense going on the road. We'll see with Cam Rising. Will he be back? Possibly. I mean, he's had a few weeks now, but either way, I will take Arizona State in one of those typical college football weeknight upsets, although it's really not that crazy of an upset considering it is only a 4-point spread, and the analytics say it's basically 50-50. Moving on to the noon window on Saturday, you do have Alabama. Alabama playing in a noon window. They are hosting South Carolina. So South Carolina, very disappointing performance last week. They scored only 3 points on offense, and I think that's key to understand. We know Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. It was a terrible loss. They were 21-point favorites in that game. They lost outright. Now they're 21-point favorites against South Carolina. I do think Bama gets back on track. I think it's going to be a mismatch in terms of Bama's defense against South Carolina's offense, possibly a few short fields for Jalen Milroe. Bama wins this game easily. They cover the spread. They're still one of the most talented rosters in college football. Jalen Milroe is still a Heisman contender. They win this game at noon, and it's kind of a get right for them in Tuscaloosa against a South Carolina team who was just horrible offensively, only 3 points against Ole Miss, and I certainly think Alabama has a more talented defense than Ole Miss. So give me Bama big to bounce back and to cover that 21.5-point spread. The next noon matchup we have is Clemson traveling to take on Wake Forest. Clemson has been unbelievable since that week 1 loss to Georgia. They only scored 3 points. Everyone was like, this is the same Clemson from last year. Well, no, now they are 4-1, or they might be 5-1 now, I think. Yeah, they are just blowing everybody out. They are 20.5-point favorites, and there's no way I could pick against them when it comes to the spread based on how well they've been playing. I have them winning this game 37-14. That's a 23-point victory, and that's a cover of the 20.5-point spread against a Wake Forest team. You know, Wake Forest is not horrible. They're not. But Clemson at this point, the way they're playing on offense and defense, Cade Klubnik has really found his groove. He's got a ton of experience, and they have a loaded, talented defense. And I think they win this game very easily there. Next, we've got a very random noon matchup. Missouri coming off that horrible loss to Texas A&M. They got blown out, traveling to take on Massachusetts. Yes, it is a home game for UMass. UMass is sitting 27.5-point underdogs. This is just a sloppy, disgusting matchup between two teams that probably don't want to be there. I will take Missouri to win it very easily. Missouri had a few really easy early matchups, like week 1 and week 2. They shut out both of their opponents. They covered both spreads. I think they're able to cover this spread as well, just barely. 27.5-point favorites. They win this game by 30, 33-3. Just kind of a sloppy game. UMass is like traditionally always one of the worst teams. They only have 1 win this year, and Missouri has had kind of a letdown of a season after that horrible loss to Texas A&M, sitting at number 21 in the nation. Moving on to the 3:30 window, it is the Red River rivalry, the number 1 overall team in the country. Texas, will they have Quinn Ewers back? We would certainly expect it considering he's had like 3 straight weeks off. They played Arch Manning. Texas really didn't look that great against Mississippi State. They had a bye week this past week. They are taking on Oklahoma. And Oklahoma, they've had their own problems. They barely beat Auburn. They probably should have lost that game. They got a pick 6 late. We know Jackson Arnold was a huge letdown, the 5-star. Texas is sitting minus 14.5. I think this game is going to be closer than expected. It is a rivalry. I'm not exactly sure what to expect. You could be dealing with the Quinn Ewers rusty narrative coming off, first quarter, second quarter, crazy environment, the Cotton Bowl, neutral site. I think Oklahoma, Brett Venables, that defense can keep this game close early. Texas ends up winning, but it's closer than expected. It's a rivalry. Oklahoma can play. This game will be close. It'll be 23-20. Give me Texas, but just barely 23-20, the final score on that one. Next, we do have Penn State sitting at number 4 in the country, kind of by default, honestly. They're sitting at number 4. They really haven't impressed me a ton. They're 5.5-point favorites traveling on the road to the Coliseum to take on USC. USC is coming off that brutal loss to Minnesota. Penn State is coming off an easy home win against UCLA, and I will be taking Penn State to win this game, and also I have them covering the spread 27-20. I trust Penn State's defense a little bit more than USC as a whole. USC losing to Minnesota, I've just got no faith in them. Also losing to Michigan, they probably should have won that game, but still, give me Penn State. Not extremely impressed with Penn State being the number 4 team, but I do think they win this one against a USC team who seemingly is reeling at this point, with Lincoln Riley really not living up to the standard that they thought they were going to be getting when they got him from Oklahoma. Penn State wins this game by 7. They barely cover that spread. Next, we do have Notre Dame coming off a bye. They're sitting at number 11 in the nation. They will be taking on Stanford. They will be playing at home, and Notre Dame, I think, is just going to annihilate Stanford coming off a bye. They know they have to win out. I have them winning this game very easily, 38-7. Stanford is not horrifically bad, but they're typical Stanford they've been like the past 5 or 6 years. They're just not a very good football team. They're 2-3 this year. Notre Dame, they're rested. They're ready. They know they can't lose another game. They've got a very interesting schedule with both Army and Navy being undefeated. They have both of those games as neutral sites. You also do have FSU on your schedule. Is not terrible, but I do think Notre Dame will win this game very easily, 38-7. Next, we do have Pittsburgh, who's ranked now at number 22. They are undefeated, taking on California. So California traveling West Coast to East Coast. Now that we've got the conference realignment, it is very hard for these teams who travel, whether it's West Coast to East Coast to West Coast, to win games and to cover spreads. Pittsburgh sitting -3.5 in this one. California had the game ripped from them. It was very emotional, late night loss to Miami. And I think Pittsburgh, they're playing for something, and they win this game. A little bit more high scoring for this matchup, 32-27. I think Pittsburgh barely covers that 3.5-point spread. Not a fun spread to bet on, 3.5, especially if you're betting on Pitt, because if they win on a walk-off field goal, it's an outright loss. But I do think they win this game. And how about them? They're undefeated right now. 3:30 game. Obviously, this is, Pittsburgh doesn't have their own stadium, but I think they win this one and barely cover. California, it's tough with that loss. They should have won against Miami. And if they would have, maybe I would have picked them to win this game because they would have momentum. But it's very emotional, and it's hard traveling after that loss, traveling that many miles and playing a Pittsburgh team who, again, they're playing for something. They're undefeated right now. They're ranked. Moving on to the next 3:30 game, it is Illinois taking on Purdue. Purdue is the worst team in the Big Ten. The Illini sitting 19.5-point favorites coming off a bye. They are at number 23 in the country. They only have one loss this year, and I do think they win this game 27-10. Very boring game. I will pick Purdue for a backdoor cover. It'll be very random if it happens, but I do think at some point Purdue is going to stop getting just totally blown out, and they get a crazy backdoor cover in this one in a very, very boring matchup between those two teams. Next, we've got a 4 o'clock game. It is Arizona traveling to BYU. BYU also undefeated, still sitting at number 14 in the country. BYU, 3.5-point favorites. Arizona, they've had a weird year. Noah Fafita, the young quarterback, they're coming off that impressive performance, really impressive defensive performance against Utah. Now they're 3.5-point underdogs against a BYU team that's undefeated, and I will take BYU. They've been very impressive. They've had a few blowout wins at home. They win this one. They cover the 3.5-point spread, 34-21, and they stay undefeated. Moving on to the 4:15 game, it is Mississippi State taking on Georgia. So Mississippi State, they are the worst team in the SEC. This is another relatively easy matchup for Georgia. They had Auburn last week at home. Now they've got Mississippi State. They're at number 5 in the country. They are sitting 33-point favorites. If you guys remember, Texas was like 38.5-point favorites against Mississippi State. They did not cover that spread. I do think Georgia can cover this one just because Georgia has struggled the past few weeks. They even struggled a little bit against Auburn, but they win this game very easily. They cover that 33-point spread, just barely winning this game 45-10 over the worst team in the SEC, at least up until this point. Moving on to the 7 o'clock window, it is Tennessee hosting Florida. So you do have Tennessee sitting 15.5-point favorites in this one, coming off that crazy loss to Arkansas. They are now the number 8 team in the country. Florida had a very impressive win against UCF at home, but I do think Tennessee in this matchup gets back on track. They win this game easily 42-14, and they easily cover that 15.5-point spread. They're too good offensively. It was a tough matchup on the road at Arkansas. Seems like they were playing better early in the second half. They did end up losing it, but a lot of these teams are bipolar. I think Tennessee comes back out and plays really well on offense in this game. Moving on to the 7:30 games, it is the big one. It is Ohio State traveling to take on Oregon. It is number 2 versus number 3. The Buckeyes, 4-point favorites, given a 64% chance to win. Going East Coast to West Coast, going to be very hard. We know Ohio State, the most talented roster in college football. They're coming off a very easy win against Iowa. The reason this game's a little bit harder to predict is because Ohio State has just not been tested at all. They've won every single one of their games by at least 28 points. And so we're going to see what they're made of. We're going to see with Will Howard. He has had a few too many turnovers the past few weeks. He cannot have that on the road at Oregon. I do think Oregon, based on how their offense has played really the entire season, they've been dink and dunk, and I think that can work against Ohio State. Ohio State's DBs play like 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, so I wonder if they'll make an adjustment when it comes to that. But the Buckeyes are sitting -4 on the road, and I do think Ohio State in this game wins 38-24. It's kind of a weird vibe when it comes to this game because there's almost an expectation that these two teams are going to have a rematch. And it's like, if you win the first game, are you really going to beat a team twice, in the same season? Because we expect these teams to face each other in the Big Ten Championship. But I do think Ohio State has shown to be better, although I'll be honest, I'm kind of throwing you're kind of going in the dark at this game because Ohio State has not really been challenged yet. We will have to see how they play, but they should have their 3 big receivers. I know Carnell Tate really didn't play in this past week. They wanted to rest him, make sure he's healthy. You've got Tate, you've got Ibuka, you've got Smith. You've got the 2 running backs. Will Howard, he's been good. He's been a distributor. He had 5 total touchdowns this past week. Oregon, on the other hand, they've kind of had a weird season. Dylan Gabriel's thrown a lot of red zone interceptions. They had a game against Michigan State. They very, very easily should have won that game by like 40 points, but because of 2 red zone turnovers, they didn't. I think Ohio State ends up winning this game 38-24 with a late touchdown to really put it away and cover the 4-point spread there. Another huge 7:30 game. It is Ole Miss traveling to Baton Rouge to take on LSU. Ole Miss sitting -2.5 in this one. It is number 9 versus number 13. LSU, they had the bad week 1 loss against USC, but they've been on a winning streak. They're coming off a bye. I will trust Ole Miss in this one, and I think Ole Miss wins this game 38-31, and they cover that 2.5-point spread. To me, Ole Miss is just better. LSU, I do not trust them. They really struggled their first 3-4 weeks. They've played better recently. They are coming off a bye. They do have the home field advantage, but Ole Miss, they already have 1 loss. They know they can't afford another one. They will win this game on the road and give themselves some breathing room, 38-31 in that matchup. Moving on to an 8 o'clock game, it is Iowa State traveling to take on West Virginia. West Virginia 3-point underdogs in this game. Iowa State, also another Big 12 team, surprisingly undefeated, but I'm going to say undefeated no more. Give me West Virginia to carry the momentum after their very impressive road win at Oklahoma State. They win this game outright as 3-point underdogs, 27-24. I have them in that matchup, so we'll have to see, but I do like West Virginia to beat Iowa State. Iowa State's going to have to lose at some point, and I think this is the week they win. It's an 8 o'clock under the lights game. It's going to be crazy, and they win 27-24 in that one. Moving on to the late night window, there's a 10:15 ESPN game. It is Colorado hosting Kansas State. Kansas State at number 18 in the country. Kansas State was 6-point favorites. The line's already come down to 4.5, and I agree with it. I think this is going to be a very, very close game. Colorado is coming off a bye. Kansas State, I also believe, is coming off a bye. K-State at number 18. They win this game, but it's very close, and it's very fun. Almost reminiscent of the last year Colorado versus Colorado State late night game. This one I have at 34-31. Kansas State wins it. Back and forth. You do have Colorado covering the 4.5-point spread, but K-State wins 34-31. I will say if Colorado wins this game, I would expect them to be ranked after this week because they only have 1 loss, and this will be a very impressive home win for them, and it's going to be a great environment in that one. Moving on to the final game here, the 11 o'clock game. I'm surprised this game is not 11:59, but I guess they want to have it at 6 o'clock Hawaiian time. It is Boise State traveling to Hawaii. Boise State at number 17. Ashton Jeanty, the superstar Heisman frontrunner, over 1,000 yards already, over 15 touchdowns. Boise State minus 21. They've had massive spreads the last 2 weeks. I've picked them to cover. They've covered both of them even with a shaky defense, and I think they cover this one 56-24. Higher scoring game again. Jeanty 3 rushing touchdowns. Hawaii's not horrible. They'll score some points. It'll be a higher scoring game. The over will hit, but give me Boise State to win it 56-24. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.